Hello class, this is Mrs. Gallegos, and today's tutorial will be on naming binary covalent compounds. This information can be found in Chapter 9, Section 2 of your textbook. What is a chemical formula? As we've mentioned previously, a chemical formula is a symbolic representation that tells us what a compound is composed of. The letters in the chemical formula are from the symbols of the elements from the periodic table. The numbers, which are written below the symbols, are called subscripts. They tell us how many atoms there are of each different type of element in the compound. And these compounds that we are naming are called binary because they are made out of two parts. You can see in H2O, we have the hydrogen part and the oxygen part. There are two different types of compounds, and as you know, we've already learned how to name the binary ionic compounds that are made out of metals and nonmetals, metals and polyatomic ions, or polyatomic ions and nonmetals. Today's tutorial will be how to name binary covalent compounds, which are always made out of two nonmetals. A little bit of a review. How do I know which elements are metals and which elements are nonmetals? Well, the periodic table has a dividing line, and I like to call it a stair step because it looks like a step, that divides the metal side of the periodic table from the nonmetal side of the periodic table. And so in binary covalent compounds will only be made out of these substances on the right-hand side of the periodic table because this is where the nonmetals live. So right now we'll be naming compounds made out of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, and all the other nonmetals. Covalent compounds. How do I name them? First, just like I did with the ionic compounds, I'm going to divide the compound into its two parts. The first element in the formula is going to get its name from the periodic table. And I'm going to add a prefix to indicate the subscript number. However, with the first element, I will only add a prefix in front of the element's name if it has a subscript of 2 or larger. The second element in my binary covalent compound will get its name from the periodic table, but I'm going to substitute its ending with a new one, IDE. And I'm going to always add a prefix to represent the subscript. Let's practice. But before we practice, let me review the prefixes with you. Mono we will use if there's only one element in the compound. Di, 2, tri, 3, tetra, 4. You might be familiar with that prefix from the game Tetris. Penta 5, hexa 6, hepta 7, octa 8, nona 9, and deca 10. Alright, let's practice. So, in our notes we have written down that when we start to name a binary compound, we always divide it into its two parts. So we will divide CO2 into its two parts. So the C we are going to, I'm going to change my pen color here. The C we are going to name after its name in the periodic table. Now because there's only one C here, I don't write the subscript 1, but I know that there's just one C here. Now remember the first element, if it's only 1, I'm not going to use the prefix mono. So I'm going to just write the name carbon. Then I have my oxygen. I'm going to substitute its egen ending for an IDE ending. And then I'm going to add the prefix that tells me the subscript. In this case, the subscript is di. So my substance is called carbon dioxide. I have my nonmetal and my nonmetal, and my name carbon dioxide. My next substance is CO. So I'm going to divide it into its two parts. And I'm going to name the first element after its name in the periodic table, carbon. And once again, there's only one carbon here, so I'm not going to use a prefix. And then I have my second element. Once again, it's oxygen. I replace the ending with the ending "ide." And then I'm going to indicate that there's just one oxygen by using the prefix mono. Now because oxygen begins with an O, I'm going to drop the O and I'm going to just put in mon. And so instead of saying monooxide, I will say monoxide. So this substance here is called carbon monoxide. Remember, our covalent compounds are made out of two nonmetals. All right, so let's look at our next substance. Our next substance, first we divide it into its two parts because it's a binary compound. Here's part 1, here's part 2. I'm going to name my first element after its name in the periodic table, which is carbon. Now there's only one of the carbons in here, so I don't need a prefix. Then I'm going to name my second element after its name in the periodic table, which is chlorine. But I'm going to replace the "ine" ending with an "ide" ending. And then I'm going to look up what prefix means for, and I discover that it is tetra. So I am going to call this carbon tetrachloride. Again, we have our last substance right here, which is N2O3. I'm going to divide it in two. Now this time I have a subscript greater than 1 with my first element. So N is nitrogen, and then if I look up the prefixes, I find out that 2 is going to be the prefix di. So now I'm going to call my first part of my binary compound dinitrogen. Then, as we know, oxygen, I replace the ending with IDE and I get oxide. And then here I have 3 as my subscript, and if I look up the prefix for 3, it's tri. So this substance, N2O3, is dinitrogen trioxide. I hope this tutorial was helpful.